Area X.O. Please make your way to stage 2, and I will invite Phil Landry from the City of Ottawa to join us right up here on the stage while we move over to stage 2 and launch our last panel for today, and then concluding, of course, with 2 really exciting fireside chats with OEMs. There's Kevin. Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Sonia. How are you?
I'm well. We've had a really exciting day here at Bayview Yards. I know that you're joining us from the GTA. We, of course, look forward to welcoming you back to Canada's capital very soon. Welcome, Phil. I'm going to hand over to you, and away you go. Thank you so much for being a part of today.
Thank you, Sonia, and good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Microsoft Canada, I'd like to welcome you to our panel today on imagining and creating the smart urban reality of tomorrow. My name is Kevin Byrnes, and I will be your moderator for the next 45 minutes. And as an industry leader with Microsoft, I have the absolute pleasure of working with governments, technology partners, and innovators across the country, and in many cases, sharing insights on how technology can help cities understand the opportunities in planning for smart and sustainable infrastructure and mobility solutions, and the need for a collaborative approach to planning today for a truly connected and autonomous transportation future. That's why I'm so pleased to be with you today and to have the opportunity to speak with some leaders in the urban mobility solutions field, vehicle automation, municipal traffic management, and of course, innovation with Area X.O, helping entrepreneurs and local governments realize the potential power and impact of visionary technologies. With today's roundtable, we're going to hear about how technology, smart city planning, and the opportunities that connected and autonomous mobility will bring in transforming urban and rural communities. And these are opportunities and case studies that will help you plan to create safer, more sustainable, equitable, and connected environments for citizens. I think it's fair to say that we all recognize rapid urbanization and innovation are the new reality, and that in the next 3 decades, more than 6.5 billion people are expected to live in cities around the world. That's almost twice the urban population that we have today. Municipal leaders will have to rethink how they plan for sustainability, transportation, utility, and citizen programs. And they'll need to understand the role that smart infrastructure plays in supporting the safe and secure adoption of connected and autonomous vehicles and other intelligent mobility solutions. With our panel, we'll be providing great insights into approaches that city leaders across Canada can take away to support that critical rethink. And before I turn it over to our expert panel members to introduce themselves, I did want to highlight some of the topics that we'll be discussing today. The challenges and, of course, the opportunities that municipalities are facing in a post-pandemic world as they plan for a smart and connected mobility future. Technology capabilities, solutions, case studies, and learnings that will help cities prepare for future smart mobility operating environments. How strategic partnerships with mobility as a service operators can help facilitate a diverse menu of transportation options, from public transportation to rideshare, car rental, and other citizen service options. And of course, how regulatory frameworks and infrastructure need to align in order to support and enable innovation that ultimately will increase safety to the public. We'll also be looking to have about 10 minutes at the end of the panel for audience members to submit questions to the panel via the chat function. So with that, I'd like to introduce our panelists today and offer each of them a few moments to provide us with some background. Starting, I guess, with Valerie Brugeman, the Manager of Engagement and Strategy for Urban Mobility Solutions with Mercedes-Benz. Valerie, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Great to be here virtually, but with you all together, even virtually is better than nothing. So lovely to join you this afternoon. Yes, I'm with Mercedes-Benz Urban Mobility Solutions team. And without going into too many details, I'll just share our entire reason for being is to improve mobility in urban environments and to look for shared values, to find partners that we can work with that have the similarly shared values of wanting to improve transportation along the lines of safety, congestion, sustainability, and equity. So in a nutshell, that's my team.
Well, thank you, Valerie. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. We're also joined today by Joseph Holmes, the Vice President of Global Business Development with Perrone Robotics out of Denver. Welcome, Joseph. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everybody. As Kevin said, I'm Joseph Holmes. I'm the Vice President of Global BD here at Perrone Robotics, based out of Virginia in the US. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here, so thank you for having me along. For those of you who don't know, Perrone Robotics is a software company at heart and the provider of fully autonomous vehicle technology and turnkey solutions for the mobility of people and things. We were founded in 2003, and we've retrofitted about 30 different vehicle types, and we've deployed our technology across the world. We are a venture-backed company with strategic stakeholders such as Intel Capital and Capstone Holdings. Today, I'm very excited to talk about a little bit more about our flagship products, one of which being with our partners Green Power Motors, a Canadian OEM. Together, we provide the world's first fully electric, autonomous CMVSS, Canadian Motor Vehicle Safety Standards compliant 19-passenger transit van that we hope to bring to Ottawa at the Area X.0 test track later this winter to test the vehicle there. Because we know as a company, at the end of the day, if it can work in Ottawa, it probably can work anywhere else in Canada and certainly across the globe. It's an absolute pleasure to be here on such a great panel, and I look forward to further discussion. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Joseph. That's really exciting to hear. I'd also like to welcome Phil Landry, the Director for Traffic Services from the City of Ottawa, who is joining us safely in person at Bayview Yards. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Kevin. It's great to be here and to see everybody. So I'm the Director of Traffic Services here at the City of Ottawa. For those that don't know Ottawa, we're just over 1 million people. We have we're very rural, but very core. We're 100 kilometers in width and 80 kilometers in length. So you could basically fit, I think, Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Montreal, and Toronto into geography of Ottawa. So we're very. We also have, like was mentioned by Joseph, winters, and it's a great place to try and test innovation and other materials. So my background, I've been at the City of Ottawa for almost 30 years now. We operate a traffic control system. We have over 1,200 traffic signals. They're all connected in real time. Second by second, we can monitor them. We have over 300 traffic cameras. So we're basically a really great test bed in terms of being able to test different types of technologies. We work closely with Invest Ottawa, and we're very pleased to be partnering with them with Area X.0, where we've got a private test bed where we've got traffic signals and signs and pay markings. So it's a good opportunity for companies to come in and test their equipment and hopefully successfully launch onto public roads where we're happy to work with them to try to improve traffic and also in the autonomous vehicle field in terms of what the future is going to look like, because we want to ensure that we're at the start of it versus trying to catch up. And we've prided ourselves in the past to being that. We want to continue with that.
Phil, thank you for joining us here today. And finally, I'd like to introduce our fourth panelist, Tennyson Favithuri, a technical project manager and engineer with Area X.0. So welcome to you as well, Tennyson. I hope I've got the name at least close.
No, that was great. Thank you so much, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the panel discussion today. Looking forward to the conversation. As you probably know, you got the spill on Area XO earlier today, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but we are super grateful for working with our industry leaders and the City of Ottawa as well. And we're looking to push CAV technology in a safe and scalable way. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So welcome to all of our panel members. And to start, I really wanted to hear from each of our panel members their perspectives of the approach to reimagining the urban reality of tomorrow. And Phil, just as a heads up to you, I am going to start with you, given your background with the City of Ottawa. But I think looking to understand what are some of the greatest smart mobility challenges and, of course, the opportunities facing municipalities today and in the future. Phil, what's your perspective from a municipal point of view?
Well, from the municipality, we're the ones that are the regulators and work with our residents to travel across the street and the city and make sure that they can do so safely. I think the challenge with autonomous vehicles, it's all new, and people still don't know 100% about it. They know that the connected vehicles and the technology that are in vehicles. We want to ensure that as a city that we're at the forefront in terms of ensuring that the regulations are in place. Like I said earlier, we want to work with companies. So we need to be nimble in terms of ensuring that if regulations need to get changed, it doesn't take years to happen. It happens overnight. But we also have to be cognizant that we don't want to have hundreds and thousands of autonomous vehicles driving through the city. So part of that, our transportation master plan, which we're currently working on, needs to be focused on that. And how do we integrate autonomous vehicles into the how we want to operate our city in terms of being environmentally friendly, sustainable. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be working on over the next little while, but we look forward to the opportunity to working with the various companies to ensure that we can hit that sweet spot, because the focus really at the city is to ensure that we have a sustainable city in terms of transit usage and walking and cycling. So I think where the autonomous vehicle really fits in well is the transit. We want to make sure that we can leverage the information and the technology to allow us to have that sustainable city. Like I said, we don't want to have cars running around, because that's just not going to work at the city of Ottawa.
Yeah, it's a really unique perspective that Phil brings to the table here. We're looking to plan for the future when that future is fairly uncertain and unknown right now. We have kind of an idea of where automation and connected vehicles are going to go, but as municipalities are looking to plan all the overlays around sustainability and smart infrastructure to support, citizen mobility in a safe community, there's still a lot of unknowns. So Valerie and Joseph, from your perspective, working in that OEM commercial industry, what would you say to Phil and other municipal leaders out there who are trying to figure out how to plan for a connected tomorrow when they're not exactly sure where some of that technology is going today?
Okay, I'll start. Thanks, Joseph. It's a really tough question, and my advice as frankly a citizen as well as somebody who knows this space to cities and other municipalities is to try to keep your head above water. There's a lot of new technologies and new news and new solutions to challenges, but also the best word I'm looking for, the best way to describe it is to kind of try to recognize the hype from what's real. And that's a really hard thing to do, because the hype machine can be huge in various technologies. And it's, I think, a city's responsibility to understand what's out there and what might work, or try to get those answers, but not necessarily fall give way to the hype too much, and do something because it sounds good without really understanding what it is trying to do and how it works. I think that's probably one of the hardest things or challenges facing city leaders, especially with respect to transportation and all the many innovations that are out there these days.
Sure, and I would just quickly add that at Perrone Robotics, we're going to try and be part of that solution, right? We don't want to come in and say that you need these roadside units, you don't need these type of mobile applications. We need to be agnostic and open to projects and to actually providing a solution. We don't want to provide another piece of technology to a city. And I think, Kevin, you absolutely hit the nail on the head talking about that rapid urbanization that our cities have. But, now combine that with over 1 million people being killed each year in motor vehicle accidents, the need for a real tangible solution is definitely there. So you combine the urbanization, you combine the vehicle accidents, and at Perrone Robotics, we really do believe that shared automated solutions are part of the solution. They're not the whole solution, they're not the whole answer, but they can definitely be part of them by reducing that single occupancy traffic and having shared autonomous transit vehicles feeding mass transportation options to really build in that holistic, safe future that hopefully cities will adopt.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, Joseph, and I come from the public sector and the transportation field myself, and I think you've kind of hit it there, something that would help Phil and other municipalities. Don't plan for automation or connection for the sake of automation and connection. Plan for the outcomes that most of the cities are looking at with any of their Vision Zero plans. Plan for safer intersections. Plan for a better engagement with citizens to understand what their mobility needs are. And the technology will eventually move to support the plans that any municipality puts forward as a priority in that sense. And Tanissan, just from your perspective, working with AreaX.O and innovators and entrepreneurs, I'm curious what you might be seeing as some of the promising and visionary smart mobility solutions that could address the uncertainty that Phil raised from Joseph's perspective, some of the solution capabilities that are out there today. And, as Valerie has said, that aren't hype, that aren't, just really cool things that are never going to pragmatically come into place and support a municipality. What are you seeing in the field?
Yeah, I think I've been in this field for not too long now, about 5-ish years, but just studying the market and where it's been, I think we've seen in the last couple of years a little bit of a change in direction. I would say maybe when these vehicles started getting developed, maybe 10 years ago, there was sort of an ideology that like autonomy is going to come in as a full sweep, and we're going to transition into like 100% autonomy. And I think what we're seeing now is more of a scaled back approach to things. There's more companies are working on niche markets, things like last mile logistics, middle mile logistics, things like that, and trying to bring autonomy in a more scalable way and a more safer way. Because as we've seen in the past, there has been incidents, and I'm sure it's not going to be the first incident. But as we're trying to scale this technology, I think it's important that we concentrate on a specific use case and really fine tune that use case before we start expanding into greater areas, to sort of echo Joseph and Valerie's points.
So Phil, and I just want to kind of round this one off with you as well. You've heard from the panel that has some insights into the way that the industry, the OEMs and innovators are going with new technology capabilities, and you've heard that they're looking to address some of the priorities that every municipality would share in keeping their citizens safe and keeping the flow of transportation going. Are there any specific benefits that you would expect to see? You've talked about planning, you've talked about being innovative and sustainable and down that way, but what are the 2 or 3 explicit benefits you would expect to see in a city where a connected and autonomous vehicle system or solution existed?
It's just the safety. And, we get in Ottawa, we have over 15,000 collisions a year. With the autonomous vehicle, we expect that to reduce drastically. And that goes to the quality of life. Unfortunately, 20 to 25, 30 people die every year on our roads. And if we can save all those lives just with the technology, I think that would just be a wonderful thing. I think also just creating the ecosystem at the city, and to be receiving all these different companies. To Valerie's point, we also don't want to just take just this is the thing of the day, so we're going to just test it and go that. We've been very, at least at the city, we're very vigorous, and I see sometimes that frustrates especially the startup companies and things like that are even just the bigger companies that want to sort of get going and want us to buy their products. But we also have to make sure that it's going to meet the need. And our challenge and that we find is that what's new and unique today in 6 months from now is no longer. So how do you leverage that? We just converted 58,000 streetlights, and we put in some nodes so that we can communicate with them. That started 5-6 years ago, but at this point, that technology is old. So we also don't have the money to start replacing things all the time. So I think financing is and working with industry on that. We have to rely on our federal government and provincial government to work with them, because we don't have the money, specifically a pot of money to do all this testing. So we work and look for partnerships, and we've been very successful from that perspective, and been able to work on some projects that we've seen some really good benefits on in terms of the strategies and where we want to bring the city from an environmental perspective and just a safety perspective.
So it's interesting, Phil. You've just mentioned smart streetlights, and they're able to understand when to turn on, when to turn off, how to work as an element of infrastructure, and of course they're pulling data back that ultimately and eventually municipalities are going to be able to take advantage on. And thinking about the role of infrastructure, and really, Joseph and Valerie, I'd love to hear your thoughts before we move to the other panelists, but thinking of the role of infrastructure, thinking of the technology that a municipality would need to put in place to support a truly connected mobility solution. What do you think that role is, and what do you think the value of the aggregate data that's going to result from building infrastructure to support connectivity for citizen services? What does the value of that data ultimately mean to a municipality, in your opinion? Hey, Valerie, how about you go first?
Okay, so I'm like opening my mouth, unmute myself. Yeah, really good questions. I think as we all talked in our earlier prep call for this panel, we were generally, I think, in agreement that developing roads specifically for automated vehicles is probably not the best use of investment, and certainly of public funds. Maybe there are certain areas where that does make sense, but in general, to equip an entire city, change everything in order to make AVs work, not probably in the best public interest. So then what does make sense? Which investments do make sense, that do make the most bang for your buck? I would argue that it's more along the lines of connectivity and allowing connectivity among, street lights, for example, or traffic lights, and then potentially that have the potential to communicate out to vehicles that can then do things like change traffic lights or optimize traffic signals, such as a proof of concept that we're currently doing in Long Beach, California, with a startup out there. I would argue that the investments in connectivity would get much more bang for the buck. That then can also help with automation when they get, when vehicles and when the technologies get to that point where they are more ubiquitous, because of course connectivity will help automation. To your question of what to do with the data, that's I think another big challenge that cities face, right? They're not necessarily equipped to know what to do with data. Data for data's sake is not helpful unless it's analyzed, and unless it's analyzed in a helpful way, it's not helpful. One of our solutions, or several of our data-related solutions, involve taking data from our vehicles, such as for road safety, identifying near-miss situations along a roadway, and presenting those data on a dashboard that's easily digestible and easily usable and maneuverable, to be able to see areas on your streets where there are problems. So identifying, most likely, partners that can do something with those data to make them digestible, make them usable, I think is key. Joseph.
And Joseph, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And really, from a Perrone Robotics perspective, you talked about really focusing on enabling automation as that element within manufacturer vehicles, be something that you're all over, and understanding not just how it works within a vehicle, interconnectivity to other.
I don't know if that was the end, but it seemed to have just cut off entirely there. But I can definitely take that question. I definitely echo everything that Valerie was saying there. Infrastructure cannot be a requirement for us as a company. We cannot come in to a deployment and say, you need these street lights, you need these roadside units. It just is not a recipe for a successful deployment. That being said, and I did want to touch upon conversations that we're having with the University of Waterloo as an example, to be putting additional LiDARs potentially in areas where our vehicle can connect to and understand, to help see around a corner, for example, which is inherently blind, potentially with buildings, or maybe it's a high density area. So that, I think, is the only acceptable place to have additional infrastructure requested if it helps engage that safety topic. I think that really is something that we're quite passionate about. And that's why we don't need anything like RTK base stations. We try and keep everything localized to the vehicle. So it just helps with that deployment and helps. There's a lot of different pieces that need to go into a successful autonomous vehicle deployment. As obviously our partners at Invest Ottawa know, it's a huge, huge deal. So to ask for more things is, I think, the last place we want to do. I would just want to also add, with regards to the data sharing piece, having that openness and transparency between stakeholders, and sometimes asking those difficult questions of the autonomous vehicle provider to say, what happened in this instance? Please let us see the data. For this to actually be a thing that in our lifetimes is something that's accepted and something that we can deploy and scale and grow, we have to just take a step back and share that data with the right people. But I think to Valerie's point, you're absolutely right. Sharing the data is one thing. Actually understanding that and absorbing it into manageable bite-sized chunks, I think is key. Our onboard loggers are just gathering millions, if not billions worth of data points on a monthly basis. So actually being able to actually understand that and use that effectively, I think is key. And that's why working with key partners like Area X.0, universities, I think is just so important for us, and just setting those expectations right from the start.
No, I appreciate that, and I will try not to drop off as I continue moderating here. Tennyson, from an innovation perspective with infrastructure and data, what are you seeing as partners come up or municipalities come up with, some of the new needs and some of the new?
Yeah, just going off the conversation that's already happening. I think like a drastic change isn't needed to infrastructure, but I do agree with the point that Joe made. Certain devices like extra lidars that can be placed at intersections, because the goal isn't to have these vehicles drive just as good as humans. The goal is to have it drive better than humans. And we know there are blind spots on the road that not every human can see. So in addition to adding certain sensors that help the AVC a true 360 environment, I think one thing to keep in mind is some of the work that we're doing with the city of Ottawa right now, opening up a public intersection for people to come in and test their devices at, things like that. Things to keep in mind is, how are we going to have these devices connected and transmitting data, and how are we going to get them powered? As you know, we can't have power lines, data cables just hanging across the intersection, right? That's totally unsafe, and making sure that these devices are secure. So that's something that I think goes unnoticed for the most part. Underground conduits are very key, but also for people that are developing this technology, it's important to know that some of their wires or some of their power requirements are easily compatible with certain municipalities. For example, something like a PoE solution might be easier to integrate into any intersection versus something more specific, right? So these are just like the little things that I'm learning working with different small medium enterprises that make it easier to deploy their technology versus something more specific.
So Phil, I want to close this off with you. Hopefully I'll get through a question. We've just talked about innovation with infrastructure and data, and coming from the public sector, coming from transportation, where you are now, there is an inherent value in data that could be pulled from different sources, and fully, recognize what Joseph and others have said. There's a privacy, element and accountability, responsibility there. There's the security of that data, but I have to think the more data a city has, the better services the city could provide both to its citizens and to commercial entities within there under the right circumstances, which could drive new revenue opportunities that are not tax-based. Is that part of the thinking of any municipality? Should that be part of their thinking, especially in a post-pandemic world where we have to consider economic recovery opportunities?
Sorry, that was for me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think that's something that we're looking at in terms of how we can leverage that. I mean, we have all this infrastructure in place, and at this point, we are looking at, and there's companies that come in and say, we'll do everything and we'll give you a percentage of something. But again, it's trying to make sure that it meets the need of the city. We're very open with open data. One of the challenges with our traffic system, because we did a pilot a few years ago where we were pushing out real-time information with the signals with the connected vehicle project, and it showed that working with some Purator and other companies, delivery companies, to see if we gave them information in terms of when the light was going to change in advance, would that get them to potentially slow down a bit slower. And we found that the results of that was we actually saw a reduction of 10 to 15% in terms of gas usage, because they had that information. So that information is available. that we can push out. The challenge is it goes to the security, because our traffic system, all the data we get is in a closed environment. It's not accessible to anybody. So how do we ensure that we can get that out safely in a secure manner? So, we from that first project that we did, we expanded to a second one where we had our city fleet use that information, and they drive around the city. They do thousands of kilometers. And again, we saw that improvement. And again, one of the things at the city that's of great importance is to reduce our GHGs. And so that example can show that there is potential using that data, but I also understand that not every city is as fortunate as we are. So I think if there's an ability for these companies to use the data that's available to complement what they're doing to potentially make the roads a bit safer, that's a good thing. But also understand that that's not potentially feasible everywhere in the world. And so I think that's an important measure that needs to be considered.
So at least from a planning perspective, recognize that there is data that could have uses to better support citizens and a municipality. And it's probably okay not to exactly understand what those use cases could be today, but don't ignore them as you're planning the infrastructure, connectivity, and the connected mobility capability within your city.
Oh, exactly. So I think it's just important that, and that's why we need to work with industry to say, okay, what's important for you? Another example, this is back in 2017 with BlackBerry QNX, to have real-time communication with the signal in their vehicle. That was the first time we actually, they had their vehicle work driverless. Our mayor went in the car and drove with the BlackBerry folks in their vehicles and showed how the connection of the traffic signal was talking to the car. So we can provide that infrastructure. We want to do it in an open environment so that anybody that wants to use it can do so. But like I said, I think there's also opportunities to monetize that in terms of, we're paying for this infrastructure. If we're giving it out to people and companies that are making money on it, well, there should be some potential revenue sources for the city, because as everyone knows, people don't like to get taxed higher than they can be. So if there's opportunities to generate revenue, which in turn will help the citizens, we're always looking for those opportunities.
No, I appreciate that. So Tanissan, I'm going to come to you on this one, and then I'm going to ask Joseph and Valerie to comment as well. Phil just mentioned there's a need for municipalities to work with industry, and he talked about BlackBerry and QNX and the work that they've done, years ago. I'm wondering from a Area X.0 perspective, and from an industry perspective, what kind of approaches would you suggest that municipalities around Canada today should consider to advance their planning? What kind of partnership models or cross-jurisdictional coalitions, mobility as a service options should they be looking at as they're planning for the connected city of tomorrow?
I think it would be a good idea to test out certain technology with trials, maybe like 6-month pilots or year-long pilots, really study the data that's coming out, see the use case. And I think the way it's structured at the City of Ottawa, especially leveraging Area XO, you're able to do that in a safe and scalable manner. Phase testing, I would say, is the safest approach here. At the private test track, you can deploy this technology, really study some of the results, see if it's safe enough, and deem when it is safe enough to go into a public environment, deploy that technology maybe for a 6-month pilot and see how it works, and then compare and contrast. And then that's when the data sharing aspect comes in, because then companies can learn from one another, from strengths and weaknesses, and then it's basically the general public that benefits from that. So I think that would be the best way for municipalities to move forward.
And Joseph, your thoughts on this?
Sure. I think the big thing for us is we want people to come to us with a problem, a challenge, or a task for us to solve. To a greater extent, there is a bit of pilot fatigue now. There's been this huge promise with autonomy for about 10 years now of, next year we'll be driving at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, doing X, Y, and Z. That has not materialized. And I feel like, and I hope it hasn't, set the industry back. But to everything that Tanissan just said, working with industry to go from pilot to deployment is key. And the only way that's going to happen is when industry, both public and private, are all aligned to be solving that challenge right from the start. If we're just deploying technology for deploying technology's sake, that is the start of an absolute disaster. And it's actually, we as a business are moving away from that and only ensuring that we deploy in meaningful environments, because I think we all owe it to the industry today. So I think that's something we're actually very passionate about. And it's something that we are starting to see this shift. And I do actually firmly believe that the Area X.0 test track is leading that charge. And it's actually really exciting to be a part of that and just seeing that change.
And Valerie, anything to close that one off?
Sure. Just I agree with what Joseph said. I think, as my colleagues in Germany say, the importance of eye-level exchange. Really being as open about the challenges ahead, your goals, the problem you're trying to solve. Because yes, technology for technology's sake is not really worth the time, especially from a public side, in my opinion. So it's what are we trying to solve? What challenges do we have internally? What are the steps we need to do internally at both the industry side and the city or the public side, or whoever the other stakeholders are? Be as open and honest as possible. That's, I think, what made this road safety product that we developed. We worked very closely with Transport for London, and it was a very great collaboration because they came to us, we came to them. It was the same problem of trying to solve this vision, get towards Vision Zero, trying to improve road safety. And they were open, we were open. It was a great collaborative opportunity. I think that's really key when you're partnering with other entities.
No, I really appreciate that. So we've got about 8 minutes left, and I do want to leave just a little bit of time for some of the questions. So for the audience, if you have any other ones, I do see there one that's targeted to Joseph around data sharing. But Phil, I want to ask the very last question to you, and I'd really love to get your thoughts, and then from the panel, their perspective as well. And it's around change and reimagining, but from a regulatory perspective. And I guess from a public sector point of view, are there challenges and obstacles in moving forward with the required changes to legislation, regulations, et cetera, that a municipality needs to work with themselves, across the borders of their cities, with the province, with the feds, to ensure that the approach we're taking to creating this new connected future is a consistent approach that we're taking outside of any one municipality's roadway? So my question is, are you seeing that drive and that interest from the policymakers, from the legislation makers, or are there challenges that you have to work through to enable driving that smart vision for the future?
Yeah, I think it's a mix of things. At the municipal level, I mean, the rules of the road in Ontario are set by the province. So, as long as we work within that framework, we're fine, and we create our own bylaws, and we're flexible and nimble enough in terms of being able to do so. I've got we're dealing with an issue right now where we're going to be installing some chargeable stations on the road, and they're going to be installed, but we don't actually have in our bylaws any designations for parking on the side of the street to charge the vehicle. So, we have the ability to, to go to council and get those things amended quite quickly. When you look at more of the provincial and the federal levels, it sometimes can become a bit more challenging because there's a lot of research. They're also looking globally, like at the federal level, they're looking at across every province, right? And trying to have consistency. And then there's also at the provincial level looking across each the province that they're looking at. So, we work with them collaboratively. We talk about our challenges and how we can actually achieve our goals to where we're trying to go. So I think it can be a challenge at times. It just depends. If it's some tied specific to a municipality, I find it can be a little easier just because we're sort of on the ground trying to manage things versus when you get to more of the provincial, which and federal levels, which are more the policy and the big picture, like trying to amend the Highway Traffic Act and the implications. What may work here in Ottawa may not work in Toronto, which may not work up in Thunder Bay. So it's just, it just depends on those things. But I know in the AV and in that area, we're all aligned and we're working. And if changes need to happen, I know the provinces, a lot of the legislation they've done is more of a pilot type. So let's try this out. If it works, great. If it doesn't, let's make adjustments. And so we're seeing a lot more of that come out, which I think is very helpful. And then we can take it from there and try to implement these different technologies and things that need to happen from that perspective.
So Joseph and Valerie, and recognizing that you probably have engagements going on across North America, probably globally, with very similar challenges that cities are seeing in the US or UK, Germany, or wherever it may be. Is it a similar regulatory challenge where cities may have a direction that they want to proceed in, but they have to proceed in a way that's uniform and consistent with, effectively provincial, federal law, local state laws, and with other municipalities as well? How much of a barrier is the regulatory framework today? And are you seeing, that interest and that drive from decision makers and governments to change that to enable this kind of innovation?
Thank you very much. I would say that a couple of things. Firstly, Ontario was the first province in Canada to have autonomous vehicles, non-conforming autonomous vehicles deployed on the public roads here, which I think is a great and huge achievement, and that was last year in itself. That being said, at Perrone Robotics, we're in a little bit of a unique position because we only automate existing and compliant vehicles today. We're not trying to bring in vehicles without steering wheels or brake pedals as our core fleet. We have partners that do that, and we look forward to those conversations as well. But that helps the conversation at a much higher level. There is a project as well going on in Toronto at the moment with Local Motors, another partner of ours, where we're deploying that technology out there as well. So it is possible, but safety has to be at the backbone of all of this. So it's a very unique position, but I would say absolutely at both the federal level and the provincial level, Canada is in a very unique position and actually a very cooperative position to be able to get these deployments out onto the public road. And we've seen that now across Canada. So I would say at this stage, there are no large barriers. It is just an ongoing dialogue that needs to happen, because at the end of the day, this is new for everybody, whether it's a new city, whether it's at the provincial level, and they just want to know. And because the reality is anything that gets deployed onto public roads where you have vulnerable road users, you're sharing it with other people, it just has to be safe. There is no two ways about it. And from the federal level, they're saying, come on in, we welcome it, but just share some data with us. Let us know how you're going to do that. In these certain different environments, let us know how the vehicle will perform. And that's why it always comes back to having areas like the Area X.0 test track is so key, because seeing really is believing. Getting a vehicle there and actually getting then the regulators to the vehicle to actually physically kick the tires, do the whole, what everybody does on every deployment, jump out in front of the vehicle, make sure it stops, to see it, and then just ride the vehicle. And then when they get out of the vehicle, we want them to be so bored that because it has just performed like a regular transit vehicle, and then boom, you then go from pilot to deployment. And that's the goal. But starting in these pilots that lead towards deployments are key.
So in 35 seconds, Valerie, anything to add to that from a Mercedes-Benz perspective?
I let Joseph take that because I think most of the regulatory topics surrounding what we're talking about here are on AVs. And my team is not directly working with automation quite as much, but I will say just generally in the US on the topic of AVs, NHTSA the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration has taken a much more lax approach with respect to testing on roads. And I think that the tides are possibly turning. At least the discussion around that is turning after certain companies have taken perhaps too much liberty with those very lax regulations, and then therefore put other road users at risk, which is not very responsible.
I appreciate that, and I can see Sonia in the top left of my screen, which means we're getting the hook. I do want to thank you all once again on behalf of our panel, CAV Canada, presented by Area X.0, Invest Ottawa and Canada North. I'd like to thank our panel members for being with us today, and Sonia for the opportunity to have such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. What an incredible discussion. And certainly we are very passionate about this particular topic. I'm sitting, of course, next to Phil. We collaborate so closely with our friends at City. We could not do any type of demonstration and implementation without that close collaboration. So incredibly grateful. Thank you for sharing all of those words of wisdom, insights, success stories, and lessons learned. And we look forward to continuing our journey together with all of you. Thank you so much. Up next, we are pulling back the curtain with engaging and authentic discussion from leading OEMs for our last two keynote fireside chats.